Invincible.
Good morning, Mr. Marcus. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
You're good. You're good.
Yeah.
Welcome to
Yeah.
another confab, right? Another 2 weeks have passed. We've survived.
Yeah, it seems like we did this yesterday.
I know,
Not
doesn't
in a
it?
bad way. It doesn't seem like it's been 2 weeks already.
It's going quick, isn't it? It's just this fall season. School has started. I have every morning I get the privilege to actually drop off my daughter. It is the best start of my day. Her smiles make me happy. It's just a lot of fun. I tell you what, it's good to be back in the groove of things a little bit more as well from the summer, and lots of fun obviously, but a little bit more structure now in our lives, right?
Yep, that's absolutely true. Fall sports have kicked off, so we're busy.
We're busy. Yep. Good morning, everyone in chat as well. Great to see some familiar faces on chat. Ashley, welcome. I know we've got Marcus in chat as well on LinkedIn. If you're in chat, make sure to say hello. We've got quite a bit of content to kind of go through from a high level perspective here today, right, Marcus? I mean, we're talking about
Yep.
data again that we talked about. What was it? I think Dave Stallman has teased us a little bit with this as well. The year of data, right, is kind of what we said Confab was going to be about, and we're finally getting to a deeper data discussion, right? Hey,
Yeah.
Sarah Joe, go ahead. Sorry,
Yeah.
Marcus.
Well, it'll be an hour, but wow, we could. Hopefully, we'll get some good discussion here today. But I think these are long, potentially long discussions. But we'll get some ideas out there. We'll have some conversation. Scott said in the chat, if you've got questions, comments, use the chat today. Hopefully, some more interaction. It's gonna be less presentation format maybe today
Yeah.
as well.
Why
Yep.
show the technology when a lot of these strategies, like it's getting confusing out there for some customers,
Very
right?
confusing.
Right?
Yeah.
Because I mean, we're moving into a new realm. We knew that data was going to be an important discussion topic that we're getting into, basically across all the products, and like things are changing. Like Marcus, like your CE, like understanding that functionality inside of a presentation is critical from a pre-sales architect perspective. Like everything that we knew that was coming down the pike is now coming to fruition. So it's really cool to
Yep.
see, but
Yep.
it is a little bit different, right?
It is. It is. So yeah, I think lots of discussions around data in terms of where do I get my data? Do I summarize my data? Where do I house my data? Um, we could have a lot of discussions in different reporting tools, which I don't know that we're going to get to today. But uh, you know, speaking more about where is that data storage? How am I going to get it? Yeah, a lot
Going
of options for reporting tools as well.
and today
Yeah.
is a major accomplishment on a personal level for me as well, Marcus. We are streaming finally from my property. So I don't have
I
to go.
see that.
I'm not in the office. I'm in my basement right now, so I don't have my office all configured yet, but we're making baby steps here. Midco, thank you. If anyone Midco, thank you, thank you, thank you. They went ahead and installed a line on my super long driveway. They ran it all the way over, so it's been a great thing to see to finally be able to do this remotely again, which is kind of cool. So
Yes, and I don't have anything bad to say about Xfinity today.
yeah, they're working great, huh? That's good. That's good. All
Yeah.
right. Well, let's get into it because I know we've got quite a bit of topics to kind of cover through this. I mean, really, today's session focused around data, right? And what we mean by that, really, if I just kind of bring up the description here of what Confab was for today, we talked about a couple of different things from a data perspective. In this session, obviously, we're talking about mining and making decision making right as part of really the grand goal here, and the data architecture that you need to be able to support your business, right? And I don't mean just the data architecture from a reporting perspective, but almost not almost, but from a transactional and also from a reporting perspective, right? Because these
Yes.
strategies are becoming much more critical for how we interact them with our systems, because it's not where you're going to have one system to rule them all. I think you guys have probably heard me say that in the past. It's more now that we've got all these independent applications that all talk to each other, and it's a little bit different than where we've been at in the past, right? Where you would buy, like I've been through integration discussions on business systems. An example would be just a really candid example, Manhattan ILS, right? So a warehouse management solution that offered more capabilities back in the day than what Business Central had, for example, or Nav back in the day. And we'd have to go through an integration story with that. And those are costly. I mean, I think
Yep.
it was like a 1,000 hour or 1,500 hour integration that we had to create to be able to tackle that. So the landscape is changing, obviously, right? Marcus, you've started seeing that too as you've been doing demos, right? What's kind of your thoughts on it?
Yeah, well, you touch on the whole need for a data warehouse, but I'm getting more and more questions on really connecting business systems together. So you've got an ERP system, so you've got Business Central. What my experience has been, how do I get that data into other systems so people can see it, can use it, can make decisions based on that. So if you think of a Dynamics 365 for sales, for example, you've got a sales team, a customer service team that wants access to that ERP data. How do we get data? How do we give them access to that data? How do they have visibility to it? Getting more questions around like a customer insight solution. So I want a global view of my customer, and how do I now use those ERP transactions as part of that overall view of data, or overall view of my customer? How do I get that data? How do I access that data?
Mm-hmm.
More and more conversations as the Business Central users, I would say, these companies get larger. So we've got some fairly large Business Central implementations, and with that comes a large volume of transactional data. So a lot of questions in terms of, well, now I want to do inventory reporting, or I want to do some analysis like that. Do I hit my Business Central database directly? Do I use a data warehouse? What are the implications around the Dataverse with those types of decision-making processes? So I think a lot of questions around data.
Yeah.
Data storage, data usage. Again, to your point, not necessarily just I want to create a financial report, right? There's other needs around that data.
Yeah, and I'm kind of sharing my screen here with you, Marcus, as well in the background. I've done this slide a couple of times to show people. I mean, it's not getting easier, right? I mean, it's becoming more complex in some ways if you don't understand how the data architecture works. And I think last week or 2 weeks ago when we were talking about the licensing, this is kind of the slide that I showed with it, where we're talking about, we've got remote assist, field service, customer service, marketing. We've got finance, we've got supply chain, we've got commerce, we've got human resources, we've got Business Central, right? We've got all these different products that now need to seamlessly hand off data from one process to another, right, Marcus? So an example would be, for a lot of customers like BC, talk a little bit about like the relationship management aspect. We don't even really talk about BCRM anymore, right?
No, not really. I mean, it's relationship management. It's not really a CRM tool.
Yep.
So your real CRM features are in Dynamics 365 for sales or marketing, customer service, et cetera. But from a customer service perspective, how do I know what a customer purchased? Right. So that's an ERP piece of information, or it's got a serial number. We got, med device companies. You need a serial number to track warranty information, or you need to track a complaint or a fault on a particular device. That data needs to get over to customer service to interact with it. I think these are real issues that people are dealing with.
So let's kind of start talking a little bit more about it in terms of the content around this, right? And Justin, welcome as well. I see people keep on coming in chat. As you have questions about data, feel free to post them in the chat. If you have questions on what is the best way, for example, to integrate, for example, from a reporting perspective. I know, Marcus, you and I have got a lot of questions and examples that we can give that our clients have tackled, and even what Microsoft says to start thinking about, right? Because really we're getting into this realm now when we're looking at reporting and the architecture with it. Fundamentally, we have databases, right? Like if we really just get to the core of where data is being stored, Business Central has a database, right, that it stores all of its data inside of. The Dataverse apps, or what we would usually call customer engagement, Dynamics 365 sales, marketing, all of those different applications, they use the Dataverse as a database backend. So from a conceptually speaking, we're not drastically different from an on-prem solution. We're just in the cloud now, where we've got more cloud-based concepts that we use with it, but they're still databases, right, Marcus?
Yeah, that's right. And I think, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago we would take that data, think of an on-prem multi-server environment. We would just take that data and we copied it to another database or another server and access it that way, right?
Yep. And that's kind of what we're doing for some of the stuff that we do now in the cloud as well, right? I mean, those are the new concepts that are being introduced here, but they make it so that you don't have to open up ports on your firewall. So you have the availability of that data to interact with it. It's just made it easier.
Yeah, well, I also think we've got some pieces. Let's take the Dataverse for example, where we've got virtual entities or virtual tables that we can view back into Business Central. Certainly implications around that in terms of I don't need to move data, I don't need to store data in two places. Clearly, there's some limitations currently on that, right? Where I think we discovered when we were doing some initial testing, I can't generate. Correct me if I'm wrong, I couldn't generate a Power BI report off of that virtual table at this point. Now,
Hmm.
that's
Yep.
a feature that's coming, but if I want the data accessible to a CE user, Dynamics 365 Sale user, I could use a virtual entity so that they could view it. But if my ultimate goal is to drive some reporting off of that, well, I need to know that that's a limitation there.
Yep.
That's not really going to be an option for me. I'm going to have to get the data someplace else or in a format that I can actually use. The virtual table is going to give me view access from a I guess from a UI perspective, right?
Yeah.
So I think understanding what some of those implications are is important.
So let's talk a little bit about the data strategy, right? So we fundamentally have for each application that you have a database backend of some sorts, a different technology, either Dataverse, FinOps apps, or BC is what we'll summarize kind of on this stream as part of that discussion, right?
Yeah.
So the very first thing, let's compare this on-prem, right? So Microsoft always calls it dark to cloud. I kind of roll my eyes on it because it's not that, right? In marketing, that's the
Yeah,
way I look at
that's
it,
right.
right? Right? It's good marketing. But the point of it really is that when we want to do reporting off of it, you've got, for example, if we pick on reporting, right? You've got different layers of reports that you need to consider as well, right? So some
That's right.
reports are, for example, like in BC, you want to do a tie out between your detail ledger and then your general ledger. So,
Yep.
inventory valuation, right, Marcus? That would be
Yep.
one. AR, AP, really common to tie out to provide evidence to a somebody, an auditor, for example, that wants to verify that every month your books are closed and they're accurate. Well,
Yep.
typically that's what you do, right?
Yep. Yep. And that would be probably a report that would be driven out of the ERP system, right?
Exactly. And so that's the
Yep.
thing to note here is that we're not saying all reporting and data needs to be externally to it. There are base system type reports that typically you run to
That's right.
validate really those processes, right? To make sure that
Yeah.
everything is functioning properly.
Yeah, and I think that's an important discussion. Had it with a prospect yesterday.
Yep.
We're showing Power BI, we're showing reports within in the ERP system. We happen to talk about Jet Reports, which is another tool that we use. And the question really came up: well, why do I need three systems, or what's the difference, or when would I use them? There really are, I think, design intentions behind those applications. And to your point, I don't know that I would do a tie out, let's say, inventory valuation report in Jet.
Yeah.
You've got an ERP system that's going to do that type of report for you. You don't need to recreate it someplace else.
But where it gets gray, I think, Marcus, right, is where all of a sudden, for example, you've got a report that you run inside of the ERP system or the business system, right? So we're talking more towards Business Central and more towards FinOps apps is where we commonly see a lot of these types of reports that are for the, I don't know, tick and tying, for making sure that everything is accurate, right? From a, like I said, like the subledger position with it. But at the same point, like there are other reports like the top 10 customers, right? That's the one that Microsoft used to demo all the time where it had a graph in it that they added. And it's just like, well, those types of reports, every customer wants to go through and make changes to it. And
Right.
making changes to these older report engine SQL Server reporting services, like it's called Report Viewer. It's a component that was designed, and guys, we're talking about like 2005 is when we had SQL Server reporting services initially introduced. Like it's an old technology. I don't know if you've ever had to deal with RDLC or RDL.
Yep.
It's not
Yep.
fun. I don't find it fun from an end user perspective, right? I mean,
Yeah, well, and I don't think it's an end user tool, right?
yeah,
It's
right.
it's a developer tool. Yeah, this isn't give it to your BA and have them work with it. Typically, it's just more complicated than that. Yeah. So I would agree with you.
So that gets to the question then when people say, let's go ahead and make changes. Yeah, Deb, 2005, let's go ahead and make changes to it. All of a sudden, they're hit with a bill of 40 hours to make changes to it. And it's like, well, you've got to have somebody do the layout look with it. You've got to have somebody drag and drop. You got to update the data set. You've got to write code inside of the report.
And frankly, it doesn't look that great.
No,
I mean,
it doesn't.
It's a columnar report that's got data in it, which, yeah, it's probably useful, but yeah, it's not. It doesn't look great.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that I don't want it to come off as something that's negative in this conversation because there are line level reports that you need. It's just to be candid with you, like I find myself more and more not needing those line level type of reports. I find me needing more of the line level to like have a queue, for example, like in the very common example, people used to run reports to see EDI errors. I remember designing reports that they would spit out and it would end up on the printer and they would take it and go sit at their desk and they'd use a yellow highlighter to go through it and identify sales price discrepancies that the price that was said on the EDI document doesn't match the price that's inside of the system. And they would then give that list to somebody else and they would go in the system and they'd find those orders and research why the pricing was incorrect and do all the different setups. Now what I do is I say, well, look at this list. I've got a field that I filter on, and then I have all my orders digitally that I can go through and make the decision on what's going on with those. The technology has changed in how we interact with it because it's more online and using phones, for example, to be able to do that. I mean, Marcus, you see a lot of changes with that, I'm assuming, as well from a BC perspective, right?
Yeah, and I think of it as exception-based reporting. So it's online. It's not something I'm going to print. I'm going to view it. I'm going to look at a limited set of exceptions, as you pointed out. So it's not necessarily running a report. It is looking for anomalies or data components, if you will, but it's not a report that I need to generate.
Yeah, exactly, right. So so when it comes down to it, it sounds like you've got your base reports and your base data that you use for a strategy for ticking and tying and making sure that you have accurate data inside of your business system. And I classify those really as system managed reports. The AR, AP, inventory valuation. Those are the most common on the ERP-ish type business system perspective. But now we're getting into the world where everyone's always being told you have control over your data, right? And I think people are confused with that because they see these reports that are inside of the system, but they don't know then that they can use different report writers to tackle that business challenge that they may have. And it may not even be a report. It could be, like you said, those interactive lists that you use. But if they are reports, typically we start talking about Power BI, right, Marcus, throughout that conversation.
Yeah, and I think, to be fair, there's other tools out there. I think our go-to is Power BI because it's just a consistent platform. So that's where we would start. But yeah, you're right. And I think Power BI, at least what I encourage people to do, is to rethink reporting in general when you think about a Power BI tool. So if you're accustomed to columnar text-based reports, Power BI can do that, but I don't know that that's where Power BI necessarily is. It really shines. I think Power BI shines when you think about data visualization. So taking data, summarizing it in a meaningful way in some sort of chart and graph that then allows me to quickly analyze that data visually, right? We're very much visual instead of that sort of the line-based report systems that we've had. And I think that's where Power BI shines. I think of even like an AR aging. Do you care at first glance, the specifics? No, everybody looks at an AR aging, they go all the way down to the bottom and they look at my aging buckets, right? And they want to just quickly know, is my over 90 growing or shrinking, right? Then I want to start mining that data for something else. But I think an aging report visually is a great example. Start with those larger buckets and then mine where you need to from there. I think that's the same thing with inventory items. And we've had those top 10 type reports. But I think that really is about how people navigate that data. They want to know my top customers and what are they doing, maybe, or
Yeah.
what top products have I been selling today, or what have I been shipping today. But it starts at that summary level.
And really, like you said though too, I mean, I'm just showing something on the screen here on really where we're trying to get to from a reporting perspective. So the non-interactive system support reports, like SQL Server Reporting Service reports, great for what they did. And they
Yep.
I think that that's part of the story you need to consider when you're implementing a system. But that interactivity from a visualization perspective, and here's the thing about it, I think people get lost in it's just a bunch of charts and graphs. It just looks prettier because it's a bunch of charts and graphs. Well, actually, like an example, like even as Stone Ridge Software as a company, a 250 plus user company, we use Power BI for a lot of our reporting. And those reports, they're not just something that are just a cool little visualization that you click on to see a portion of a pie. So, for example, I mean, we've got data that's being shown in rows inside of our reports. In FinOps apps, we've got reports for workspaces that show trial balances, for example, that you can access. I know, Marcus, you yourself have actually created reports that are in Power BI that are more interactive, that allow you to, for example, drill into revenue numbers or drill into jobs, right? I mean, you have a whole financial report that you wrote, right? That
Yep.
you can interact with. And it's just so much easier to use, right? To
Yep.
interact with it and get to some of those details that you need.
Actually, jobs is a great example, Scott, because I've written a lot of job reports with or project accounting,
Mm-hmm.
whatever your term might be, with Power BI. And when you start, let's say, from a project manager perspective, you're managing 4, 5, 6 projects. You want to know, is your run rate looking good, not looking good? Are you over budget, under budget? Do you have stuff that's not being billed? Right? There's some high level things that you want to really look at in a quick way across your project. So that's sort of that first view, if you will, of the data.
Yep.
Then you go, oh, well, there is something off on this one. Now you can click on it, and then it would take you to the next layer. So it's peeling back the onion in a sense, right? Maybe I'm looking at a task level, or maybe I'm looking at an individual level to see, well, do I have a problem with a specific area of the project, or with a particular individual on the project? But then drilling into the transaction details where I need it. But I don't need to start with transaction details. I can very much start with a summary level. That's the nice thing about Power BI in my world. It
Yeah,
just I
and
can start there and then drill where I need to.
what's even more interesting about it though is that think about it from you challenge me and you say, Scott, all your visualizations do is they make it so that you can click on it and see another visualization that moves really quickly to a different look and feel, right? That's one way to look at it. Well, I'm on the product dev team of Power BI, and I'm going to be like, well, you know what? Do you know what kind of feature I want to add to this? I want to make it so that when you click on that and right click on it, I can analyze the data and I can find the discrepancies, for example, inside of it. It's something that they added that we didn't have before, right, Marcus? Like,
Yep.
I think Greg Graham on our team, he made the overall equipment effectiveness. And I think I've said this on stream before, but he was able, instead of hunting and pecking for the data, he just right clicked on it, analyzed it, and it found the work center that had the lowest effective utilization, basically. And then from there, he was able to then see what was the reason for it. And it turned out it was like a material shortage that was causing more of the issues for that overall equipment effectiveness. But I mean, those are features that they're adding then into Power BI that we wouldn't get inside of the ERP system, like we wouldn't see inside of SQL Server reporting services, right? And I don't
That's
know,
right.
have you
Yeah,
used those types
absolutely.
of features then too?
For demo purposes, I have. I'm out of delivery, so I haven't done those implementations with clients, but I've certainly built out, and I know the one that Greg has built out, very useful. I don't know that without a lot of data mining, you could figure that out, right? You certainly not at any of the rate that system can do it. Right? Power BI can quickly analyze that data and find some anomalies for you. It would take a person some wild time to dig through that to figure it out.
Yeah, I'd be interested in chat, guys. I mean, what's one of the coolest features you've seen added to Power BI? It'd be interesting just to see perception-wise, because I think that that analyze feature just isn't talked about very often, and it is a really cool feature that makes things just easier to really manage with it. Like I said, I'd be interested in chat if you guys spam it, tell me what you think, or even just badger us with it. One thing I wanted to bring up, Marcus, then though, is that kind of going with Power BI. So we talked about the transactional reports, the tie-out reports. We talked a little bit about Power BI and visualizations and how it can be used as a really powerful tool to really analyze your business. But let's get back to the data, right? How do we get the
Yep.
data, right?
Yeah.
So
Well, that's the big question. And I think the question I get frequently is, can I just hit my Business Central system directly and pull all the data that I need into Power BI,
yeah,
right? The secondary question is, well, what do I do with this Dataverse thing? Do I move my data to the Dataverse? What do we do with data lakes? Is that detailed data? Is that summary data? There's a lot of questions that come up from people in terms of what do I do with this stuff, and how do I actually manage that data?
Yeah, so let's talk about that because that is a really important distinction in terms of how you access and store your data. Because if we always start in technology, technology is kind of cyclical in my mind in terms of the concepts that are introduced. Like we're going to cloud now. Well, we've had mainframes right before in the past. I know
Yep.
there's differences. I don't want to generalize, but I'm going to generalize a little bit. If you think about it, though, like, so now I need to access this data. I can create a direct connection to BC. I can create a direct connection to Dataverse. Why wouldn't I want to do that? Like,
Right.
why wouldn't I want to do that? Well, let's go back now to on-prem environments. How many times did you have a performance impact in your environment because of a report that ran that slowed down your SQL server?
Right.
I mean, I've heard
Right.
from every single customer that's out there. Now, the challenge to that argument is, well, it's in the cloud. It should scale. It should do all those amazing things that we're told it's supposed to do. Guys, these are just computers in a shipping container that are sitting in the middle of a desert potentially. Some of them are actually in the water as well, right? But think about it like that. Like it's still physical hardware that has to do these types of reports and transactions. So architecturally, there's probably a different story like we did in the past with data warehousing that maybe we should start considering even from a cloud concept, right, Marcus? And I mean,
Yep.
is that something that you get questions around quite often as part of that data architecture? Like, how do you delineate between what should be moved to a data warehouse versus what should be just directly accessed inside of Business Central, for example?
Well, I think that's a great question. And when you think about some of these larger tables, for example, in
Yeah,
Business Central,
yeah,
you look at general journal transactions, or you look at inventory ledger entries, which are typically maybe your little larger tables that you're going to be starting to do data analysis with. Yeah, and going through millions of records potentially is certainly going to take time. And if you think about a Power BI report that you want near real time, you're going to be hitting these tables. You're going to be hitting these objects continually. And I think that not only is the report going to be slow, but you're going to affect performance on your users of the system,
at
right?
some level, or you're going to hit like
Yeah,
the API thresholds or
yep,
access thresholds that Microsoft puts in place for the production environments, right?
yep. So you're going to have to get that data someplace else. I'm an advocate of transaction detail reports. I think you really need to ask yourself if you need all of that level of detail as well, right? Do you need actual daily GL transactions, or can you summarize those by day or by week or even a month balance, right?
And
Depending on what type of report you're looking at, you really don't need 2 million detailed lines because no one's ever actually looking at it that level.
exactly. And and
Yep.
and and also you need to start thinking about, so this gets into the data strategy discussion, like database storage now,
Yep.
it's a service. It is a there's a premium on it. Examples of that, $40 per gig. I mean, that's where we're at right now, guys. Like that is truly where we're at within a storage environment, so that once you hit above the BC FinOps apps or Dataverse thresholds, you've got to buy storage packs. And those storage packs for that data are $40 per 1 GB that you add. Now, there's a lot of reasons why, and I think we've talked about this on stream as well. High availability, redundancy that's built into it, fast online storage for it. Like they're, NVMe type technology based drives that are supporting a lot of those types of transactions that are out there. So the infrastructure perspective is more expensive. And there's obviously some incentive as well to use other technologies, right, to be part of your grander goal and vision, where you're going to want to take a lot of this data that's inside of your business system and put it somewhere else that you can still use then for reporting from an
Right.
ultimate enterprise perspective here, right?
Right. So Scott, I mean, just to pose the question to you.
Yeah.
So if I summarize my data from BC, so let's take I don't know, net inventory transactions per month, for example, right? Just something basic. Is that am I better off putting that into a Dataverse table, right, at a summary level? Do I put it in Dataverse at a detailed level? Do I leverage a data lake at either a summary or a detailed level? I mean, what are the things that I need to be thinking about in making that decision,
Yeah,
right?
that
I mean, we've talked about cost, but what else should we be thinking about?
Yeah, cost to me is one of the bigger drivers with it because
Right.
it can get out of control very quickly. Think about it like this: there are a lot of technologies that compress the data inside of Dataverse, that compress the data in FinOps, or compress the data inside of Business Central, but ultimately you're going to run, especially in a high transaction volume environment, you're going to run into a space constraint issue with it. It's a fact of life that you're basically going to encounter. Now, there's two arguments that you could do with this. One would be that you push on Microsoft really hard to lower the cost of what storage is to make it more accessible to everyone. But really, the competitors aren't doing that. NetSuite storage is insanely expensive. It's even more than that of Business Central. And a lot of the other cloud providers that are out there, they charge a premium for storage. So if you have the entire market moving that direction, being one customer to try to push that, unless you're like GM or some major company that has a strategic alliance with Microsoft, isn't going to move everything else, right? You're not going to move the market with it. So from an architecture point of view, you've got to start putting your thinking cap on how do you use each of these technologies to be able to maximize your investment. And when I say maximize your investment, I feel like I'm doing a sales pitch. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to say they're just like when you go to a construction job site, you've got people that will use regular hammers, and then you'll obviously have the air compressor hammers that you'll use, the nail guns, right, for certain tasks and jobs that need to be done. And each of those tools are used then to build a house. So when we start talking about a business system strategy, it typically is where a lot of the Dataverse and a lot of the FinOps apps, those databases, for example, they're fantastic for transaction consumption. OLTP, online transactional processing, right? That's the old SQL Server versus OLAP, which was the analytical processing. They're fantastic for entering in that data very quickly and recording the event that occurred that's related to it. They're okay at reporting. They're not the best. They're okay usually at what we call near-term reporting, verifying and validating for the last month that the numbers are correct, verifying and validating that general ledger detail is for a year, for example, or maybe 2 at maximum for that. But once you start going beyond that, that data becomes more stale. Like if you actually do an analysis of how many times you access data beyond 2 years, for example, I can pretty much guarantee that it's getting down to 1% of the data that you have in your database is going to be hit with that. Now,
Yep.
architecturally, like BC, for example, the way they do summing, right? It's across all entries from the beginning of time. Those
Right.
concepts are shifting though now. So what they're doing is they're saying, okay, store 2 years of data for your online transactional processing inside of the solution. But what you want to do is you want to then really start focusing on using other technologies then to archive that data so that you can then use it for reporting for more multi-year trending and type of analysis, like maybe even, for example, some of the machine learning algorithms that look at data over a period of time to see product volume changes so that you can come up with an accurate forecast, right? What they're looking at doing in a lot of ways, Marcus, is moving it where we're not just using Dataverse, BC, and FinOps to store that data. We're taking that data and then moving it over into a technology like a data lake. And
Right.
the reason for that is cost. Data lake storage is pennies per gigabyte versus $40 per gigabyte. Like, it's a substantial difference between it. So when I get into a lot of conversations with people around this topic, we start with Dataverse, great for building your app, really rapidly capture data, really easily report off of current state of the business, so to speak, or even a month back or even a year back from a financial perspective with it, right? Even
And that's
technically. Yep, go
and
ahead.
that's consistent with FinOps or BC,
Exactly.
right?
And
It's
even with Dataverse, like
yeah.
click dimensions, for example, the data that it stores inside of our environment, as an example, when we used it, and as we use it, it takes up a large amount of data. Like, it's an insane amount of data, and our marketing team does a great job of managing it. But you know, beyond 2 years, it's like, well, how much of that data is really needed? It's just sitting there, right?
Right.
So, but it's super important, and the end user experience is super important. You may still need to go back to that data. An example would be like picking on that click dimensions example with it, where I'm like, well, you don't need 2 years of data. Kelsey, Sabrina, Leah, they're all like, wait a second, Scott, no, 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 it doesn't work like that. Because like what we want to show, for example, is a customer journey of this customer has done these actions, and ultimately this is the lifetime. And in our sales cycle, we can have, for example, a multi-year sales cycle that can occur, and that customer journey is really important on
Right.
how we market, how we advertise, how we interact with customers, and how we differentiate ourselves. But with the tools that are out there now, that data, the 2-year-old data and plus, shouldn't be in there. It should be in a data lake. And then from a reporting perspective, from a reporting architecture perspective, you want to start designing reports that combine your online data, which is more of like your Dataverse, your BC, and your FinOps apps environments, and the data lake portion of it, right? That's a really important thing to think about, because then from a reporting perspective, you're taking multiple sources and joining them together at a very basic level to do a lot of your reporting.
Yeah, and you're talking, just to clarify, you're talking about detailed transactions into the data lake. So
Yep.
this isn't a summary process, a condensing process to go to the data lake. This is where the transaction details live.
Imagine data lake as a low speed, intentionally, a low speed, high gigabyte storage location that has a fantastic cost with it compared to any of the other storage solutions that are out there. Typically, an example of it, we recommend taking one for one. So you'll do the detail inside of the transactional processing. So let's pick on another process. Let's say that you're doing inventory movements and transactions, picks and
Yep.
putaways from a business system perspective. You need that detail, right? For a period of time on it moved from bin A to bin B. But 2 years down the road, you don't need that, other than maybe for like heat map analysis. If you want to, if you have a same product that you're selling over and over again, like where can I optimize inventory? You may want to look beyond a year or 2 years to see that detail. But that being said, what you do is you take that detail, you put it into data lake, and then you archive it inside of the business system. So either it's removed from it or it's summarized, where it's summarized substantially inside of it, so that you have not only just technical record compression, but you also then have time compression that goes then into that transaction. So you would say over instead of having 1,000 transactions or 1,000 records show what happened in it, you would have one record that shows the summary over a month of what happened, for example. So
Yeah.
that's the big difference with it as part of it. And Sabrina posted something in chat here. Another example: you sell someone a pair of running shoes. You know the average length of the time people use shoes before buying again. You want to know if someone purchased 2 years ago, so you can start targeting right where they should be looking for a new pair of shoes, or right when they should be wearing. Yeah, right. So there are certain products that span time, and we recognize that, right? And we want to make sure we include it. So
Yep.
that's a really good point, Sabrina. That means then, even if you go down the strategy perspective of having a lot of the detail for up to 2 years, for example, inside of the business system, you still don't lose that forecasting because you can take that data and archive it into a data lake. But you need to start designing processes that think about how you join older data with newer data inside of really our solutions. And that's
Yep.
pretty common across the industry at this point.
Yep. And I'm just thinking about project go lives. So pretty typical, right? Clients say, well, we've got 20 years of history that we want to bring into the ERP system. Well, no, you don't. You don't want that
But we
data in
need
the
it. We need
right,
it.
right. Yeah, yeah. You don't want it in the ERP system. So as great as that sounds, yeah, that is not the place to do it. So I think maybe that's a good place to start the conversation, is to think about, okay, what do you do with all of that historical data, first of all, that as you go live you want access to it. Well, a data lake is a great example of where to put that data,
Well, it's a
and then
condition.
think.
Yeah, sorry, Mark. It's a conditioned response, right? And then
Yeah,
think, yep.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And then thinking about reporting on that. Before we run out of time, I wanted to also think through, or at least talk about, then what do we do with a data warehouse, and how is that different, the same, complementary to really your transaction system, your historical transaction details? Where does that fit in the mix?
Okay, so let's go through the progression of reporting from a business perspective, and I think this should resonate with everyone. If it doesn't, then I'm really off the mark. You are a small company. You do your reporting. You do a direct Power BI report against Business Central, Dataverse, whatever it is. You're not hitting volumes of data, so you don't have to worry about this broader architecture perspective that we're talking about.
Yep.
That's the base level, and at a company at a certain size, that makes sense. Like, that is not the wrong strategy for a smaller business. Now, let's say you start getting more volume, you're starting to pick up, you've moved to a 100 to 200 person company, you've got a lot more detail inside of your data. You start noticing tables are getting bigger. Oh my gosh, I need to have a strategy to archive, right? To bring that data into a lower cost storage medium, which is Data Lake. And then I can still do my awesome reporting. So I can use Power BI, click on it, say, look at this data lake, and then use Dataverse data and join them together and create some fantastic reports with it. So from the end user experience, you never, ever, ever, have most end users don't even know of it. Like, especially if you're doing a lot of that report design, you can
Yep.
make it so that they don't have to worry about it. Because even at that level, even though Power BI is an end user tool, usually you have subject matter experts that are managing that to be able to join that data together and then present that on the screen.
Right.
Now, let's say we're getting into enterprise, right? So if you're on the enterprise side and you heard me recommend that you just use Data Lake, or you just go against the direct system, you'd probably kick me out of your office. And I would agree with you. You should probably kick me out of your office. At that point, I'm not talking the reality or the truth of what's going on. The reality and truth of when you start looking at a data warehouse is where you have mature business processes, number one, that are consistent inside of the organization. So as you've grown, you've built in that consistency, and you have a demand for performance reporting that you need very quickly and easily without having the complexity of knowing where those sources of data are from a reporting and end user perspective. And what I mean by that is that when you grow as an organization, you're not just going to have Dataverse, and you're not just going to have, FinOps apps or BC as the database backends with it. You're going to have another solution that you're going to buy. And that's because the nature of software is like that, where you have a requirement that comes out of something. You have a team that you've delegated that authority to make that purchasing decision for their budget. They're going to go through a selection process. And you know what? It's not always going to be a Microsoft product, right? That's the reality of it. Now, how do you make it then, though, from a reporting perspective, that you can actually do really good reporting. Well, that's where you start looking at a data warehouse then for it, because now you've got volume, you've got the ability to store that data in a lower cost area, you've got multiple data sources that you may need to use, and you want to build a structure around this is how we analyze profitability. This is how we measure these metrics inside of our organization: revenue, profit, product lines, things of that nature. Well, really, what a data warehouse is, then, Marcus, is it's a project to summarize data in a more aligned fashion with the business metrics so that it's automatically taking those different data sources, joining them together into a cube, as we would call it from a data warehouse perspective. And then from a reporting perspective, everyone that's writing reports for BI, they're not looking at the individual sources, they're looking at the data warehouse to be able to get that data. It is a more structured manner then to be able to then get to that data and make the organization more consistent on what their reporting is. And that it is an evolution. You typically don't see data warehouses on companies that are less than 250 million in revenue. Like it is not as typical to see it. There's always exceptions, but it's not as common. Anything above 250 million, almost always they'll have a data team. They'll have some type of data architecture already kind of discussed. They'll use tooling to do that. But really, if you think about it, you've got your business system that does great at consuming data and actually getting all that inside of the system. And then eventually you get to a point where you got to say, hey, we can't have 16 different systems or even 3 different systems to record data in and write reports off of. We need one consistent view of it. We introduce a data warehouse then to be able to tackle that because it's high performant. It's not as slow as data lake then as well. It's summarized information that matches those business metrics. And that's typically then where you're seeing, Marcus, those data warehouses being introduced as part of that concept.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think that helps. I'd love it if people have questions too around that. I hope that helps people make that distinction. Yeah, I think sometimes in the SMB space, I don't want to discourage data warehouses, but I think sometimes people think that's going to solve all their problems. And to your point, they may not have defined metrics, processes, et cetera, to actually feed that, and the project never gets off the ground. You know,
Yep.
they are going to start creating this warehouse, but they're really unable to define what that thing is even going to look like. And I encourage people, especially again your SMB side, until you get to the data volume, you probably can adequately do the reporting that you need off of the transaction system or off of a data lake, and not necessarily need to go to a data warehouse prematurely.
Yeah, it used to be in the
Yeah.
past, like they've done a better job at this now with the technologies that are involved with it to make it more um, or cheaper, basically, just to boil it down. I remember going through Hyperion, Business Objects. I've gone through implementations of those particular products, and
Yep.
really the cost of implementation was as much as the business system implementation. I mean,
Yes.
it was insane.
Yep.
And a lot of those projects failed too, just like business system or ERP back in the day, because you have to have that analysis. You're designing metrics with it. You're designing cubes. It was a lot to do to go through and then implement a data warehouse, for example. Nowadays, we can get a lot of the same things, like data warehouses would have the summarized data. They usually had then the charts and graphs and all that kind of stuff, usually inside of that technology. What they've done is they've taken those charts and graphs and they've basically abstracted that from having to have a data warehouse. You can now do those charts and graphs, for example, using data lake or using the direct connection to the business system to be able to
Yep.
report off of it.
Yep.
But at the same point, the advantage, obviously, of a data warehouse is that consistency in view of the data, of having a team that's now basically ensuring that our metric data is being populated correctly. Instead of having individual end users have to define what revenue is, you already have a cube called the revenue cube that has all that definition inside of there. So
Yep.
there are also, I want to kind of bring this full circle. There are also, though, cubes that have already been added into, for example, like FinOps apps. So there are native cubes inside of there. There's called the sales cube. There's a project cube that Microsoft has already gone through and pre-built these for you. So the thing to note here is that you're not starting this fresh every time with every single product. There are third-party solutions that are out there that they've gone through and done some pre-built cubes for it. There's native ones that are built in, for example, into FinOps apps, and those can help you hit the ground running faster. So that way you can incorporate those really into your data strategy and architecture really long term here.
Yeah, and Jet Enterprise comes to mind as well.
Yep.
You know,
We
they
use
have,
that even.
Yeah, and they have created cubes, some standard cubes that do connect to Business Central, connect to the older nav systems, that give you a starting point. So to your point, you don't have to start at zero. You could start at maybe they're 75% complete. I wouldn't say they're 100% complete, but they're going to get you actually pretty close, and allow you then to start building a data warehouse, a jump start on building a data warehouse.
Yep.
It's interesting to your point that those tools, those platforms, used to come with reporting tools, right? Jet was classic, right? You would use Jet reports against your Jet Enterprise or your data warehouse, essentially. Now, they're still selling those tools, but they're positioning Power BI as your reporting tool, and I think tools are having, from a reporting perspective, a hard time keeping up with something like Power BI. I mean, Microsoft is just investing so much in the way those visualizations work, the way the user interface works, that these other tools are just saying, okay, well, we can get you a jump start in the data warehouse, and then you can use our tool, or you could use Power BI to report and actually create the reports.
And you're right, Marcus. I don't want to pick on any names here because, I mean, all those solutions are fantastic solutions, but it is rare. It's more usually that the company that we're interacting with has experience with the tool and they want the tool more than us saying they need the tool. Because a lot of the reporting, for example, in Power BI, it tackles almost all of it. Like I can be on my phone and I can access a report. I can create fully interactive Power BI reports like the one that you have, that you click on areas and it actually has a navigation bar to it, and I can drill into it and click on back, and I can use that
connection to Power Automate.
Yeah,
actually,
right.
Do data flows connected to the reporting.
Yeah, and you can do apps now in the reports. Like the concept that we're getting into more with our clients and our prospects is showing, for example, you have a report. Great, it's always been fantastic for one-way consumption. Guess what? I can put a little app in there, and that app, I can actually send information back then to fix a problem. So I've got reports, for example, where I've got a sales order list, and I tackle that EDI scenario where I import an EDI order into FinOps or into BC. It creates that sales order. It identifies it as a price discrepancy between what was on the EDI document and what's in our system. It shows up in a report. You click on that report, and then you authorize it or click on something and it goes and releases it inside of Business Central, for example. So you're getting into reports that are not just one way for consumption, they're two way, where you can actually report information back. And that to me is just, it's so much more convenient from an end user experience to be able to do things like that.
Yeah, well, just even to your point on the tab metaphor within Power BI, I love the idea of having an end user navigate to a single report and then being able to navigate the data to see the areas that they need to. So I'm not asking them to go out and run a different report, right? It could be a tab, the report itself that takes you where you need to go. So I'm a huge fan of that sort of scenario with Power BI as well.
Yeah, it's been pretty amazing on what they've been able to do with it. And then there's also other technologies that, once you start getting into the data perspective with it, like the actual data warehouse, you need to start considering, how are you bringing that data and pipelining it, right? There's technologies like Databricks that make that transformation. There's always a transformation process. Usually, like the best practice, there's a concept called data lakes. Data lakes have another concept called data hubs. So think about it like this: like if you're a larger organization, you're not just going to have one data lake. you're going to have a data lake in each region or localization that you typically support, right? And the reason I'm bringing that up is because if you think about data, governance of data becomes a really important topic too. Like what data can go outside of the country versus what data can you actually house inside of a central repository? What do you have to anonymize as you go through that because of regulatory requirements that are out there, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
these
Well,
concepts,
levels of data privacy.
exactly, and these concepts
Yep.
start to scale now when we look at the enterprise side. You're going to have a data hub. That hub is for a particular region where you can prove, for example, that it doesn't move anywhere else. But then let's say you've got a corporate data lake now. So you want to take that data hub and you want to upload data into the data lake. They're technically both data lakes. One's a hub and one's called a data lake. Like it's a corporate hub versus a regional hub, right? So you get into those types of concepts. But what's important here is that eventually, when you want to do, for example, some type of data reporting off of it, obviously at that level, you're more than likely looking at data warehousing. Well, to join that data together, you can use things like Synapse. So it's called Azure Synapse, where you can actually define multiple data sources to be able to join that data together so you can have one query that then goes across all these different data sources that then provides a consistent view of data then that you can interact with. And that's
A union, essentially.
yeah, basically,
Yeah.
it's like having a on SQL Server you could have multiple databases, right? And then you do
Yep.
union all and join it all together.
Yep.
Synapse can be used in that type of a fashion as well. It has more advanced features beyond just that, but the point is that it can actually take multiple data sources, join them together, and then you can use that to feed your data warehouse. So that way you don't have to have staging tables or transformation areas that you've got SQL databases to be able to do that. You can do it online. You can do online queries then as well with it. You can actually do on-demand based data warehouse structures because you can create views inside of Azure Synapse. And in Synapse, then you can basically say, grab the data from these different areas, and on demand, it'll join it together. So you don't need to use a data lake for maybe you want to get to some detail about something, but it's a very rare type of query, but you still need it. Well, why waste all the time and storage in a data warehouse and the maintenance of it, where you just create a view that joins that data together for you so you can report off of it every now and then, knowing it's not going to be as high performant as a true data warehouse. You still get the benefit then of both to be able to tackle that.
Yep. Okay.
So I don't know, Marcus. What do you think? I mean, it's different, but I mean, a lot of these concepts. I guess, Chad, I'd be curious on what you guys got to say about it too. A lot of these concepts are really the same, right? I mean, they're now just cloud concepts that we're using for it.
Yeah, I think that's true. You've got more options. I think the key in all of this though is you have options, and I'd also be a little cautious to say there's some sort of silver bullet in all of this. It just seems to me that there is a conversation, there's some thought, there's some discussion, understanding goals that an organization has for reporting, a data strategy that we talked about. These are all really important conversations to have in terms of outlining then what is this ultimately going to look like. Yeah, again, I don't think there's just an immediate go-to answer that says, oh, this will automatically solve everyone's problems.
Yeah.
Other than a Power BI report, which I don't know, that just will solve every problem you have.
Every problem, right? Every problem. Well, I mean,
the
like I
answer
said,
to every question
exactly,
is a Power BI
right,
report.
right. Now, I think, personally, I think that we've come to this bridge where there's some concepts that people just don't understand yet, not entirely. And here's the thing, like, if you came to me and said, for example, you're on the enterprise side, typically you already have kind of your own data strategy in place, right? That you're using to be able to tackle what you're reporting off of right now. And so it's very common for us to come into an organization and already have a data architecture in place. And Greg and team on our BI side, on our data and analytics team, they've got like an assessment that we can do to help you through that. So it's not just, we obviously know the Microsoft way of doing it, the way that that's being recommended for large enterprises that use it and then endorse the Microsoft technology. But it's not atypical to have multiple sources, to have multiple technologies involved with it. Even recently, Redshift. I mean, I'm talking with one of our existing clients about Redshift and data, and that's more of an Amazon-based concept, right? So there's this strategy at a macro level, remember, is something that can scale. We've got transactional details still, just like we have had in on-prem solutions. We've got a way to take that and put it onto slower storage. Typically in the back end, back in the day, we'd partition the data and then put it, for example, to a SAN that had low-cost disks that were there, right? That was the strategy there. Well, same thing. We just call it data lake now. We've got data warehouse online now. We've got ways to join that data together that we used to use with SSIS. Like all these tools are out there. They're just now more at a cloud concept with some rebranding that's there. And that increases accessibility, it increases performance, it increases capability because you don't have to buy your own hard drives, for example. But that strategy, that concept, if you apply the old concepts to the new, they are a great way to really jump into this at the very beginning, and then from there grow on the new capabilities that you get then by really moving more to this cloud data strategy compared to a more on-prem data strategy. So something just to know. Cool. Well, I think we have chatted way too much today. I think tomorrow or next week, 2 weeks from now, I personally think we're going to have to show some more software, because that's kind of, or at least show maybe, I think next we've got on September 23rd, Marcus, the key features that are coming to D365 in October, right?
Yeah, I was going to look that up, but now that's it. Yes, we're looking at, what is this, Wave 2 for 2021 Wave 2 release information. So
hopefully we can show
it'll
some
all
stuff.
be software next time.
Yeah, we can show some stuff as we go through this, right? We had a PowerPoint that we usually go through as well with it. Beyond that then, so that's September 23rd. October 7th, we've got Dataverse and Dynamics in review. So should be a lot of fun to talk more about where has Dataverse gotten with all of our solutions, right? We used to call it the Common Data Service. We'd have tables that we called the Common Data Model that we'd apply towards it. I've gotten questions like, hey, field service has this table inside of it. Can I use that table in Dataverse if I have D365 sales? So I want to start talking a little bit more about really what do you get with Dynamics? Like why Dataverse is separate than Dynamics, right? Technically, like what do we get with it, right? So that's going to be a technical discussion that we're going to be talking about it. 2 weeks from there, on October 21st, we're going to have the functional discussion with it. So we're going to talk more about like marketing and all those different cool technologies that are built on it. And then really, I think out on our site, we've got on November 4th, which is getting more towards, the Christmas time period, we've got challenging the development paradigm. More and more of our customers, and even us internally, we're redoing how we tackle development. It's not just X++. It's not just AL. Like, there are some really cool things that we can do now, and we want to highlight those, I think, in that session to show here are solutions that you could have spent 1,000 hours in BC, but we did it in 180 hours on Power Platform, like something like that, right? We want to start showing to kind of make you guys understand where the future is here. So should be exciting.
Those are well, actually, that's going to be an exciting topic, because I think these are really discussions that we need to have about where do we do development, and again, thinking about goals, purposes, end user design, all those questions that we can talk through in that session. So that'll be a good one.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for joining. Like I said, 2 weeks from now we'll have some more fun. Enjoy the beautiful fall weather. I know I will, and we'll talk to you, like I said, in 2 weeks. Thanks all.
All right, see ya.